Sandwich style cases always present a challenge with thermals. You're here because you wanna find a proper fan layout to keep your hardware from choking. I spent some time testing different configurations so you don't have to, and honestly, wasting hours on completely meaningless tasks is nothing new to me. Not long ago, the downsize from the Jones was at 20 to a Geeek G1 Pro. In air cooling mode, this case supports up to 4 120 or 140mm fans. I used a few Thermalright K12s and one K12R. I tested both dual fan and quad fan setups. I eventually had to swap one of the bottom fans for the reverse blade, take K12R, to eliminate a specific home. It was turbulent noise caused by the tight clearance near that triangular element under the GPU riser and the case spine. For the specs, 4 TLK12s locked at a constant 1600 RPM, the 7800X3D is running stock under an NXP 120X67 with its fan fixed at 1800 RPM. The GPU is an EVGA 3080 Ti FTW3 undervolted and fixed at 0.875 volts with a plus 135 MHz offset, drawing roughly 325 watts. GPU fan speeds are locked at 2250 RPM on the outer fans and 1950 RPM on the center fan. The RAM is clocked at 6200 megatransfers per second at CL28. Ambient room temperature was a stable 21.5 degrees. For the workloads, I chose Cyberpunk 2077, logging at 10 minutes at16 on GG Street, mainly because it's the only place where you can legally watch women without getting another restraining order. Let's start with the baseline setup, which is just the two top fan configured as exhaust. All fans were fixed from Windows boot, and the results are: the GPU is at 65.15 degrees, the CPU sits at 61.64 degrees, and the SPD hub is at 34.64 degrees. Perfectly reasonable temperatures. Now we'll add two bottom fans as intake to feed the components with fresh air, to see how it affects temps. Let's see what happens. Here are the results for the top exhaust combined with bottom intake. The GPU temperature rises to 66.33 degrees, the CPU average goes to 61.87 degrees, and the SPD hub drops to 34.38 degrees. The CPU is basically unchanged, but the card actually gets worse by more than 1 full degree. What's the point of installing bottom intake if it actively hurts the card? Now let's flip those bottom fans to exhaust, making it a full exhaust configuration. We get the GPU going down to 64.1 degrees, the CPU dropping to 60.75 degrees, and the SPD hub hitting 33.31 degrees. The CPU average barely shifted, but the GPU dropped by over 1 degree compared to the intake setup. Things get more interesting when looking at the GPU hotspot. With the bottom intake, the hotspot increased, switching to full exhaust dropped it by 1.28 degrees. Those were the averages. Let's look at the maximum peak values. With the bottom intake, the GPU core and hotspot choke, catching extra heat. On full exhaust, the peak numbers look like this. The GPU maxes out at 66.5 degrees. The CPU peaks at 69 degrees, which is over 3 degrees cooler than our baseline, and the GPU hotspot reaches 75.4 degrees. That hotspot is nearly 4 degrees cooler than the bottom intake configuration. The last time I saw numbers drop that fast was on a bank account when I bought this GPU. It was my mom's, and those were her funeral savings, so she hadn't spoken to me since. Looking at the timeline graphs, the bottom intake configuration takes significantly longer to reach thermal equilibrium. The case suffers from heat soak. It is highly likely that within 10 minutes the temperatures didn't even maximize and would keep climbing on a longer run. The full exhaust layout stabilized halfway through. The physics are simple. In sandwich cases, the GPU and CPU pull fresh air directly through the perforated side panels. Looking at my AXP 120X67 and the GPU, the heatsink fins run vertically. The air channels are vertical, meaning the fans push air through the heatsink, exhausting it strictly out of the top and bottom of the radiator. When you introduce a bottom intake fan, it blasts right against this exiting airflow. The hot air simply gets locked inside the shroud and case. Bottom line, bottom intake in sandwich SFF cases is most likely a scam. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Drop a like and subscribe